Hey everybody, this is TJR and I'm here with my sister CB.
Hi.
This is our third time we've gotten together here
Yes.
to do a video, and I'm really thankful for you to join me. In case you haven't watched any of our previous videos together, there was the last video we did where we talked about Mary Poppins, and we talked about the differences between the books and the movie. This was before the new sequel came out, and we did that video. And so you might want to check that one out. I'll try to leave links for it. And we also did the video where we talked about the original pilot episode of Star Trek entitled The Cage. But today, we are going to talk about a subject that seems to get a lot of chatter on the internet. And a lot of it negative, some of it positive, but mostly negative, I think, from what I've seen. And that's the subject of Disney remakes.
Yes, and I think you have more expertise on this subject than I do because you've seen more of these than I have.
Well, okay, maybe I have, but also I think you're more familiar with the backstory to a lot of these original films. First of all, of course, you've seen all these original films for the most part, but you're more well-versed on the source material for these Disney films. A lot of people seem to forget that there was a version of The Little Mermaid before Disney's Little Mermaid.
That's true.
And so you know about a lot of this. And so I think that's going to be very helpful in how we talk about this. And you're a big fan of the Disney animated films.
I am.
Just as I am. And you're very well versed in them. And you've seen them numerous times. And so recently, Disney has begun this trend of remaking their animated classics. This year, as we're talking right now, Dumbo just came out, the remake of Dumbo. And this year in 2019, we are still going to get a remake of Aladdin. We're going to get a remake of The Lion King. A remake of Lady and the Tramp is in the works. So I presume this year, maybe? So this year, we're getting a lot of remakes of their animated classics. We're going to talk about what we think of this trend. Why do some online critics feel so negative about it? And yet, why do audiences seem to, for the most part, embrace this? Before we get too much into it, I thought we should talk first about what constitutes a remake and what doesn't. If you go to Wikipedia and you search Disney remakes, animated films, you'll see this list that we're going to look at first. And some of these I don't think qualify really as remakes.
If I were going to define a Disney remake, I would define it as a movie that went back to the Disney version of an animated film, and they did that one over again. And usually they seem to be doing these in live action. But I would distinguish that from, for instance, a spin-off. Would you say that Christopher Robin is a spin-off?
I would say Christopher Robin is a sequel. To me, a spin-off is where you take like a character from one of these films. Like, let's say we take a character like...
How about the two aliens who go after Stitch, and you did a movie just about them?
That would be a
more
spin-off.
Of a spin-off.
That would be a spin-off. Just like the Minions movie with Despicable Me. You had a spin-off movie with the Minions, who were like not the primary characters, they were...
Okay, so
ancillary characters.
We've got remake, sequel, spin-off, and a sequel is like we're going to just follow the same group of characters, but after that story is done taking place. Which
Disney has done a lot of. For a while there, they did a lot of what I would say sequels to their animated classics. There was those direct-to-DVD.
Yeah.
Sequels, some of them. I think their one Beauty and the Beast one was a prequel of sorts. With the exception of the Aladdin ones. Those are the only two I've seen. Otherwise, I've not seen any of them. And most of them are sequels. And the general feeling from most people who have seen them is that they're not very good.
Okay. So then besides the remake, spin-off, new version, and sequel, I would also say there's such a thing as a reimagining.
Yes, I agree. I think a remake can also be a reimagining too. To a certain extent.
No, I think a remake is more, you're doing the same story over again.
Okay.
A reimagining is where you're taking the story and you're turning it on its head, or you're turning it inside out.
Okay.
And I would say maybe Maleficent would be an example of a reimagining.
I would agree. I sometimes find myself looking at Maleficent like it is a remake, though, simply because the portrayal of the character, the design of the character is so similar to that of the animated film version, and also the character embodies scenes and dialogue that are from the original film as well.
Well, I think a reimagining can take place, sort of the story going on at the same time as the original story does. So you would have scenes in common, but you're doing them from a different perspective, or you're turning things inside out, upside down. A good example would be Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, who are two minor characters in Hamlet, and they're having their own play, but every now and then they wander into a scene of Hamlet and say their lines, and then they wander back into their own play.
Yeah. So you would call that a reimagining? Or a spin-off?
I would call it a reimagining.
I guess you're right. A spin-off would be as if those characters had a totally different story.
Yes.
Outside of Hamlet. This is taking place during the same time. Let me bring up something here and see what you think of this. Several years ago, I forget the filmmaker, but he did a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And he did a shot-for-shot, beat-for-beat remake of the original film. Back then, the criticism before the film came out was, why? Why are you even doing this? What point is this? This film is already a classic. It's already perfect. Why are you remaking it? And why are you making a shot-for-shot remake? The film came out. It bombed horribly in theaters. And the criticism from everybody was, why? Why bother going to see this when it's the exact same film? Why not watch the original one directed by Alfred Hitchcock? So when Beauty and the Beast was being trailered and it was obvious it was going to be this exact same film, I thought the same thing, and a lot of critics did, yet people reacted the opposite. They went to see it in droves, and they loved it.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's why I didn't go see it. But maybe there was a feeling that animation to live action would be enough of a change.
That was enough of a change.
Whereas live action to live action remake
no change.
was
Why
no
do it?
change, especially since they were doing shot by shot, beat by beat.
This brings up something that just occurred to me. I wonder how many people thought it's going to be interesting to see how they pull this off in live action. Is that possible?
Well, it's possible, especially for, I don't know, some movie connoisseurs, but
the average film goer?
oh, I don't know.
Do you think it's more just, hey, I already like this, I want to see it this version now?
I think there was probably a lot of that.
Of course, you know, it's interesting. If anybody who would say, well, let's see how they pull it off in live action, well, these films, so much a big part of them is animation. Because when you're doing characters like the candlestick character in Beauty and the Beast and all the furniture characters, you know, the clock and all those characters, Mrs. Teapot, whatever she's called, I forget. You basically have to do these in animation. You just do them in CGI. Jungle Book, mostly all animated with maybe 25% live action. That's another thing. We call this a live action remake.
I know, but it's all CGI.
But aside from Mowgli, you know, I'm sure there were some live action animals used in the film.
Oh, yes, you're right. And when I said live action, it's just because
it looks photoreal.
It looks photoreal.
Yeah. It's hard to even say if this is really just another animated remake with a little bit of live action in it.
Yeah.
So saying that, I guess, really is kind of it's kind of a ridiculous statement to say that now that I think about it.
To say that it's live action?
Yeah. To say, well, let's see how they pull this off in live action. Yeah. When a majority of it has to be done in animation anyways, because how else can you pull that off? Let me bring up this. Disney owns Star Wars. What if Disney decided, hey, our animated films to live action are doing well. Why don't we remake Star Wars? Why don't we remake it in animation? What do you think? Do you think fans would react? Do you think people would flock to see it like they did Beauty and the Beast? And in this, I think they're going to flock to see The Lion King. I really think I think The Lion King is going to do gangbusters business. I think it's really going to do gangbusters business. Aladdin too.
It probably will. And why does that bother you, or why does that bother me?
I think we expect more imagination. We expect more creativity.
Yeah, I definitely get the feeling that there's a poverty of imagination at Disney Studios when they're doing this kind of thing.
When they're doing it. Because it's not like they don't make original animated original imaginative films or even original animated films. Mm-hmm. They do still make them.
I think I would much more like to see them do remakes on films they've done that have not been very good. I'm thinking of Pete's Dragon, for instance.
Yeah. The remake of Pete's Dragon was completely different from the original film.
It was a better film. But then I see them where they've made a really nice film, like Lilo and Stitch, which I love the animation in that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great style. Very stylistic.
Yeah, and they're going to remake it.
Yeah.
In live action?
And yeah, you're kind of losing the stylization that you can only get in animation when you try to put that into live action. I mean, maybe they'll find ways to echo it, I'm sure, who knows. But I don't see how you do that without then going back to animation with CGI.
Well, I suppose that they could do a Lilo and Stitch story, but they make it different. They make it dark and gritty, or who knows.
You could.
But
given the trend, I have a feeling
if they're going to do it,
they won't.
Shot by shot, the way they're obviously going to be doing Lion King, I just don't see the point. So I guess I want them to do new and wonderful things rather than do
beat for beat remakes.
Oh, yeah, beat for beat remakes, basically.
Yeah. I wonder if, I'm saying that Lion King is going to do gangbusters because Beauty and the Beast did gangbusters. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder also, at what point where audiences start to say, we're just watching the same movie again. Why don't we watch the original animated film? And I kind of wonder if there's a point where audiences will say, okay, we're not going to see this anymore. I don't know. Maybe there isn't a point. Maybe there is. Once again, if it was done in reverse, would audiences go see an animated version of the original Star Wars or the original Star Wars trilogy? Would they go see that? Would they be less inclined?
I don't know.
You know what my feeling is?
What?
That people would be less inclined.
Because it's going to animation?
Yes, versus live action, because I still think that in America, we still view animation as somehow subpar to live action. Live action is real. We see live action is real, so therefore it's more legitimate. Whereas animation, it's a drawing, it's not real. It's not as legitimate as live action. Even though we've been proven time and time again that animated films can make us feel in the same way that we feel for live action characters.
Or even more.
Sometimes even more.
I have to admit, I know people who cried during the original Dumbo.
Oh, yeah. Well,
with the mother elephant, and...
Yeah. Oh, people
so
cry
sad.
to this day. People cry to this day during that sequence. And, the original story, the original Snow White, the very first screening, that was like you've probably heard this story before, maybe other people have, but the story was that during the premiere of Snow White, you had all these big movie stars attending. And when Snow White allegedly died, and there was that silent scene, that plays very silently where the dwarves find out and they start crying, there wasn't a dry eye in the theater with what they said. Mm-hmm. Everybody just broke down into tears during that screening.
That's what classic Disney did so well. Mm-hmm. They brought character and emotion to life in their artwork.
Exactly.
Which sometimes you can actually show better than in live action.
Project yes, because cartoon characters, the less realistic we make them look, the more I think we see we can project ourselves into those characters. That's one of the key things about animation, and even in comic books and in comic strips, is the simplification of the human face allows us to project ourselves into those characters when we either read their stories or we watch their stories in animation. That's my personal feeling.
And really good drawings and animation can really, really convey emotion.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendously.
Tremendously, I agree. I want to go back to what you talked about earlier, where you mentioned the idea of going back to animated films that were never that good to begin with. You talked about Pete's Dragon, which is, of course, a remake that's also a complete reimagining. It's not a musical like the original. It's a completely different story. The Black Cauldron, which is a film that has a lot of mixed feelings. People have a lot of mixed feelings about it at best. I remember seeing that film and thinking it was kind of a train wreck, even back when it came out, and I was still pretty young. I thought that was quite a train wreck of a film. Why doesn't Disney go back and remake The Black Cauldron?
They've got the rights, and it's a great series of books.
Mm-hmm. I would think there's an instant franchise there.
Yeah. I think it would make a great animated series, but maybe it would be better if they actually did it in live action, especially with what you can do with CGI these days.
Yeah, I agree. Why don't they then?
I don't know. Maybe it's so bad that they feel people would not have that. Ooh, I know that already and I like it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess it all depends on how they market it. I think you're probably right. If they went and made just a live action remake of their film, there wouldn't be that built-in audience that already likes it. However, if they chose to make a series of films out of the series of books in the same way that there was a series of films made out of the Harry Potter movies, I mean, out of the Harry Potter books, excuse me, then I think if they marketed it right, they could have a whole new franchise on their hands.
Yeah.
So I think the only other animated film from Disney that I can say I don't think is very good, and I really don't think it's very good, is Robin Hood.
Okay, I'm afraid I like that one too.
You like that one? Okay.
But Robin Hood is like, it's one of those stories that anybody can make a version of. So they could make another version of Robin Hood.
Yeah, well, anybody could make a version of Alice in Wonderland or Snow White, so long as they don't do the Disney version. But, Disney remaking their version of Robin Hood. Yeah, do the CGI animal characters.
You wouldn't want to do that over again. There would be no point in it.
I agree.
It was cute and charming for what it was, but they could do a Robin Hood movie. No problem.
Well, sure, they can make a Robin Hood movie, but what I'm saying is, since you brought up the topic of why don't they remake the films that are not considered very good, now I personally don't think Robin Hood is very good. I think Robin Hood is a classic example that you could show to film students how to make an animated film not funny. Because none of the jokes work. None of the timings work in none of the timing of any of the jokes works in Robin Hood. I think it's a tremendously unfunny movie that is trying very hard to be funny. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, none of it works. Now, you can disagree with me all you want, of course, but
why
not remake it in CGI with, the animated animal characters, anthropomorphic characters?
But if none of the jokes work,
make them work this time. This time we'll make it funny. And I think Robin Hood.
So you'd have to rewrite it. So you're not doing a beat for beat remake.
You could do a beat for beat remake. You just have to time the jokes better. When I watch Robin Hood, it's like I see how the jokes are set up and how they're executed, but none of them work.
I bet you saw this as an adult.
I have seen it. I saw it as a kid. I've seen it as an adult. None of the jokes work. It's kind of like those late period Looney Tunes. Mm-hmm. You've got the classic period Looney Tunes where the timing on the jokes is excellent. Then you've got the very tail end of Looney Tunes when they had different people running the animation. They didn't have the classic people working on them anymore. And you've got these Bugs Bunny cartoons, these Daffy Duck cartoons that are just not funny. Uh-huh. And they're trying to be funny. They're trying to use some of the same gags they've always used, but they don't work. It's because the timing is just off. It's just not there. And I feel that's what's wrong with Robin Hood. So you could make Robin Hood beat for beat the same pretty much, maybe flesh it out a little bit more, add a little bit more plot and story. But you could make the humor work, which I feel it never worked. I'm sure some people would disagree with me, but I feel like the humor never worked in that film.
Okay.
Why not do that? I think, don't a lot of people like Robin Hood? I think a lot of people do still like it regardless.
That movie or just in general?
The Disney movie, that version. I think a lot of people do.
Well, I liked it.
I'm glad you liked it.
But I don't go out on the street corners and talk to people about Robin Hood. So I don't know about other people.
Yeah, so why not do that one? I guess, but then again, I think the reason is the same reason why they probably wouldn't do the Black Cauldron is just because they don't have that built-in that assurance that chances are we're going to make a ton of money off of this because people like the original.
Obviously, if your intent is to give people bread and jam, you want to do it with your biggest hits.
Yeah, obviously.
What about if they went back to the original source material? Now, those are live-action remakes that I would be really intrigued to see and that I would want to watch. For instance, it says here in Wikipedia that they're going to remake Little Mermaid. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they're planning to do a shot-by-shot the same.
I'm sure they're going to make it a musical.
But what if they went back to Hans Christian Andersen's original fairy tale of The Little Mermaid? Mm-hmm. It is so bizarre. Mm-hmm. For one thing, The Little Mermaid doesn't get the guy in the end. He never recognizes her. Mm-hmm. Oh, and when she gets her legs, it hurts her to walk. It's like walking on knives.
Really?
Yes. And she can't talk, and the prince is kind to her, but he ends up marrying this foreign princess who reminds him of the girl who saved him from the ocean, which was the Little Mermaid.
Oh, gosh.
He doesn't recognize her, and she eventually dies and goes up among these spirits in the air. She's been, in the water. Now she's been on the land, and now she's in the air with these spirits in the air. It's very strange.
Uh-huh.
Or what about Pinocchio?
Uh-huh.
It says there they want to remake Pinocchio. Supposing they went back to the original story, which was Italian, it's very dark.
I've heard it's very dark.
Okay, so Pinocchio kills the cricket.
You're kidding me.
He smashes the cricket with a hammer, I think. The ghost of the cricket comes back to him every now and then. There are these bizarre scenes where Pinocchio's not going to take his medicine. And so these black rabbits carrying a coffin come in and say, they're just waiting for him to die because he's not going to take his medicine. So then Pinocchio, I'll take it.
Uh-huh. Whoa.
And then on Pleasure Island,
Uh-huh.
he actually, in the Disney movie, he just grows the
ears.
The ears and the tail, and then he gets out of there.
Yeah.
He turns totally into a donkey.
Uh-huh.
He's made to go work as a donkey. Very hard life. And eventually he becomes injured. I think his legs break or something. And his master throws him into the ocean because he doesn't want a broken down donkey. And throws him in the ocean to drown. And there the little fishes come and they nibble off his donkey body. And the wooden puppet is underneath.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. I can see where that would do great box office. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're making a horror film.
Well, it's not a horror film.
I know, it's not. But, let me ask you this. You said you'd have a great interest in seeing this. Well, I know you're familiar with this source material, and and I know you how you look at it as a piece of literature and as a piece of history. Why would you be interested in seeing this in live action? And why would you be interested in seeing this as a live action film? Would it be to see, how do they communicate that to a modern audience?
Well, I'd actually prefer to see it in animation.
Okay.
But Disney wouldn't do it because why should they do another animated
version
when
they've got
of
one.
These films that they've already done? So maybe they would do it as CGI. Could do it as CGI.
Yeah.
Or live action.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, slap Tim Burton's name on it, and then they'd find an audience.
I think Tim Burton would be the right person to actually direct that version of Pinocchio and that version of The Little Mermaid, or David Lynch maybe, or maybe David Cronenberg. But I have to wonder. I think the reason why I can already tell you why they wouldn't, because audiences wouldn't want to see it.
Well, I'm not saying they would use every thing in the book.
Yeah.
But if you go back to the original source material, you can do an original version.
A different story.
And that is what I would like to see. And there's a lot of stuff in the original versions.
As we've talked about this, it seems to me, especially when you bring this up, it feels like Disney has already made their perfect version of Pinocchio.
Oh, they have.
They've made their perfect version of Little Mermaid. They've made their perfect version of Beauty and the Beast. Mm-hmm. And we're back to, I think, to where we started here, which is there's no point in remaking these again. They've made a perfect version. But as long as audiences are willing to pay, you can't blame Disney for making them.
No, and they will probably make them until they have made one too many.
And audiences stop going.
Yeah,
I guess you're right. In fairness to Disney, and you and I both have a great deal of respect for what Disney has done artistically, both in the past and in the present. They still make great new original films. They still make really good animated films. A film like Inside Out, yes, it's Pixar, but that's part of Disney. Mm-hmm. They still make original drama films that don't get much notice. Queen of Katwe being a good example.
Ooh, I love that one.
Great motion picture. In fact, Disney has put out a number of dramas that are for all ages, that are very well made, but people tend to not go.
Maybe they don't get as much advertising.
Maybe. I remember The Finest Hours getting a lot of advertising. I don't know how it did in theaters, but I don't think it did that great. But I remember it getting a lot of trailering in the theaters and a lot of advertising on TV. But they do make really good films, both animated, both live action. We don't want to just talk about Disney as if they have no imagination, which is what a lot of people blogging on YouTube do. They say Disney is completely barren now of any imagination. But we can't blame them if people are willing to spend all their money to go see these remakes. We really can't blame them for making more of them.
No.
And, if people, if something works, you keep making more of it until people stop buying.
Especially true in movies.
Yeah, especially true. Disney owns Marvel Studios, and all of these Marvel films are based on pre-existing source material that's already been told in comics. A lot of this stuff gets changed a lot in its translation to film. We should mention that too. But for audiences, it's a new thing. Of course, Disney hasn't started remaking their Marvel hits yet.
Not yet.
Hopefully they'll wait at least 20 years before they do that. Given the negative feelings for the Star Wars prequels, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who wish that Disney would remake the prequels, would retell the story of the origin of Darth Vader, basically, and make it a better film. That's always a possibility.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to see it as long as George Lucas is alive, though.
And I'm not sure I'd want to see it as a scene-for-scene type of remake.
No, I think it should be a totally different thing unto itself. In fact, I think it could be just one movie, possibly.
Ooh,
maybe a trilogy, but maybe it could all be done in one movie.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we have critics, both in print, both online. And when I say critics, I mean bloggers, vloggers, self-appointed critics, and even professional critics who don't like when Disney remakes these classic animated films and they make them too much like the original film to begin with. We've got a lot of that. We've got audiences who don't seem to care. Is this phenomenon of Disney remaking their own films, is this somehow wrong or bad? Because remakes have always existed. And some filmmakers have remade their own films. Cecil B. DeMille remade The Ten Commandments. But this is unique because Disney is remaking their own films. Anybody can do Frankenstein, but you can't do Universal's version of Frankenstein. Unless you get a license, I imagine, if you try to use that iconic look of Frankenstein. But anybody can remake Mary Shelley's Frankenstein if they want to. Anybody can do an adaptation of it to film. Not a remake, but an adaptation.
Yeah.
But here Disney is remaking their own animated films and just converting them to live action. Is this a bad thing at the end of the day?
Well, it's not evil.
Okay.
No. On a cosmic sense, it's not even important.
Okay.
But I guess because I like Disney, I especially like Disney animation so very much, I want more and better from them.
I think that my beef is not so much with Disney, but with the general public, because they see these as somehow better than the animated film. When the animated films, like I said before, they're already perfect. Mm-hmm. There's no need to remake them into live action, except that it's going to make Disney a lot of money. And I think the reason why it makes Disney a lot of money is because I think a lot of people feel this is somehow more legitimate, that it's being done in live action. And to me, I think it bothers me that society feels that way. And that's just me personally.
Well, I think that, people like what they like. I don't think most people are going around saying, this is more legitimate because it's live action now. Uh-huh. I think they're just saying, oh, I liked Beauty and the Beast. Oh, here's another Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
And people like what they like.
Well, sure.
And there's room to
that was terribly profound.
I know.
People like what they like. For those of you who like this sort of thing, well, I guess this is the sort of thing you like.
Well, hey, Hallmark shows Christmas movies all during July, and then they start in October, and they show them all from October through December because people like them.
Yeah, true. I'll admit, this is not in any way a sign of the impending apocalypse, the fact that Disney is doing this. I agree with you. I think people like us, people who criticize this, we want more from Disney. We want them we want them to keep innovating.
We want them to do original, interesting, exciting animation.
Yeah.
And when they do a remake like the Beauty and the Beast remake, I just feel like they're phoning it in.
Yeah, that's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. And that's what I feel like when I look at the trailer for Lion King. Mm-hmm. And because I think that the success of that film kind of basically sent a message. You know, this film did better than any of the other attempts. So this is what people want. Give it to them. And that's why Lion King looks like a shot-for-shot remake. That's why Aladdin, mostly, I admit it looks a tiny bit different, but it's mostly going to be the same film. You can tell.
That's what it looks like on what they've released so far.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. Okay, so in the meantime, I know I'm probably going to go check out Dumbo just to see how much it differs, how much it's changed. I've heard mixed reviews on it, very mixed reviews on the film, actually. It's not doing that well, which once again sends a signal, don't change these things too much. Keep them as much like the original as possible. But I am still planning to go see that. I guess at this point, we should ask everybody out there, what do you think? Do you go see these remakes? Why do you like them? What is it you enjoy about them? Do you want them to make them more and more like the originals, or do you want them to change them? And just let us know what you think. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, please click like, please click subscribe. Be sure to click notifications so you can know when we release new videos. And I just want to thank my big sister here, CB, for joining me on this one. I really appreciate your knowledge, especially of the original source materials.
You're welcome.
On these, yeah. And hopefully we'll do more videos together. And everybody, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.